Today, we're going to look into 4 most evil serial killer stories. Let's begin with the first one. It was June of 1973. The kind of southern heat that didn't just press against your skin, it wrapped around your bones. Doreen Hope Dempsey stood at a lonely roadside bus stop just outside Sumter, South Carolina. She held her daughter Robin's tiny hand and wiped the sweat from her forehead with the sleeve of her thin cotton dress. Robin, barely 2 years old, tugged at the hem of her mother's skirt, her big blue eyes blinking against the bright sun. In her other hand, she clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit, the kind that had been washed too many times but still carried comfort. Doreen was tired, not just from the heat or the pregnancy or the long bus ride. She was tired from life. At only 22, she had already been through more than most women twice her age. She was heading home, not because she wanted to, but because she had no other choice. The father of her unborn child had left. Her job had disappeared. She had tried, for as long as she could, to make it on her own. But there comes a point when survival demands surrender. Returning to her parents' house wasn't a triumph. It was an admission of defeat. But at least it was safe. The bus had dropped them off hours ago. She expected someone, maybe a cousin, maybe her stepfather, to meet her. But no one came. No phone booths nearby. No shade. The road stretched out in both directions, quiet and empty. Robin started to fuss. Doreen knelt beside her and pulled a juice box from the diaper bag. She forced a smile. "It's okay, baby. Just a little longer." Then, the sound of an engine. A car approached, slow and rattling like something coming apart. Doreen stood up quickly, brushing dirt off her dress as she turned toward the road. The vehicle stopped just a few feet away, kicking up dust that floated in the heat like smoke. The window rolled down. Donald Henry Gaskins leaned out, grinning. Everyone in town called him Pee-wee. He was small, odd-looking, with a twitchy kind of energy. He was the sort of man you remembered, but never missed. Doreen had seen him around. He knew her ex, maybe helped him fix a car once. They weren't friends, but he wasn't a stranger either. "Need a lift?" he asked. Doreen hesitated. She looked at Robin. The little girl had finished her juice and was now chewing on the straw, completely unaware. Doreen looked back at the road. No cars, no help. She didn't want to say yes. But she also didn't want to wait another 2 hours in the heat with a toddler and a growing stomach. So she nodded. He got out, popped the trunk, and helped with the suitcase. Doreen lifted Robin into the back seat, adjusted her seatbelt, and slid into the front. They started driving. The silence was awkward at first. Doreen tried to make light conversation, mentioned how hot it was, how fast the summer had come. Gaskins barely responded. His hands gripped the wheel tightly. His eyes darted occasionally toward the rearview mirror. But mostly, he just stared straight ahead. Doreen pointed when they passed a familiar sign. "You missed the turn," she said. "I know a shortcut," he replied. The pavement faded into gravel, the gravel into packed dirt. The road grew thinner, swallowed by tall trees on either side. Spanish moss hung from the branches like gray curtains. The light grew dimmer, cooler. Robin began to whimper. Doreen looked back. "It's okay, baby. We're almost there." But she wasn't sure anymore. She cleared her throat. "You sure this is the right way?" No answer. She tried again. "Donald?" Still nothing. She reached for the door handle. Locked. Her heart skipped. Something didn't feel right. The car slowed to a stop. "Get out," Gaskins said. "What?" "Out." Doreen looked at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes empty. "Donald, please. My parents live just—" "I said get out." He got out of the car, walked to the trunk, and opened it again. Doreen turned around and unbuckled Robin, cradling her tightly as she stepped outside. The air was thick, almost swamp-like. The only sounds were insects and the occasional drip of water from somewhere unseen. Then she saw the rope. Gaskins pulled it out slowly, not rushed, not panicked, calculated. "Donald," she said, taking a step back. "What are you doing? You ask too many questions." "I have a child," she pleaded, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm pregnant. Please, just take us home." But he didn't. She backed up farther. Her feet slipped slightly in the soft mud. Robin began to cry. Doreen's voice cracked. "We won't tell anyone. I swear. No one even knows we got in your car." He didn't respond. She tried to run. He lunged. Robin screamed. Doreen fell hard onto her side, arms wrapped around her daughter. She kicked, fought, clawed, but it was useless. He was small, but he was vicious. He wrestled Robin from her grip. Doreen shrieked. She tried to stand, but he shoved her down again. In the distance, no help, no passing cars, no sounds of civilization, just woods, and him. Her hands were pulled behind her, rope, tight, her face pressed into the dirt, and Robin, taken from her arms. She screamed her daughter's name, over and over, but no one heard. And the man walking into the trees with her baby in his arms never looked back. Doreen's scream echoed through the trees, but it didn't go far. The pine forest around her swallowed the sound whole, just like it swallowed the sun behind thick, moss-draped branches. She stumbled as she tried to regain her footing. Her arms yanked tightly behind her back with the coarse rope Gaskins had pulled from his trunk. Her breath was ragged, her chest rising and falling like a drumbeat of panic. Robin's cries faded farther into the trees as Gaskins carried her daughter deeper into the woods. "No, please, no!" she screamed again, her voice breaking. "Robin!" But all she could hear now were her own sobs and the muffled rustle of leaves. Her knees scraped against the forest floor as Gaskins dragged her behind a thick cluster of brush. The ground was soft and wet, almost sponge-like beneath her. A mosquito buzzed near her face. She flinched but couldn't swat it away. Her hands were bound tight, circulation already fading. "Shut up," Gaskins muttered behind her, his voice low but sharp. He forced her down on her side, then stepped away again, vanishing back toward the clearing. She turned her face to the side, dirt coating her cheek. Her eyes stung with sweat and tears. The forest seemed alive, buzzing, clicking, whispering. But it wasn't alive with help. It was alive with silence. Every second felt like an eternity. She couldn't see Robin, couldn't hear her anymore. Had she stopped crying? Had he? Doreen bit her lip until it bled. She rocked her body back and forth, trying to loosen the knot at her wrists. Her breath came in short gasps. She wasn't thinking anymore, just reacting. Then the rustling came back. Footsteps, leaves breaking beneath boots. And then, Gaskins appeared again, alone, no Robin. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The question was too big to ask. He crouched down in front of her, breathing heavily but smiling. "She's quiet now," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. Doreen started to scream again, a sound not just of fear, but of complete collapse. Something inside her fractured. He struck her across the face, hard. "I told you to shut up," she whimpered, her body curled into itself. She wanted to disappear, to be anywhere else, anywhere but here. But she was here, alone. Robin was gone. The rope dug deeper into her skin as he yanked her upright. He pulled her by the wrist toward a new clearing. one that sloped down to a murky pond. The surface was still, but the smell of rot lingered. Flies buzzed around the edges. Something floated near the bank. Maybe a log, maybe something worse. He pushed her down onto the muddy slope. "You brought this on yourself," he said quietly, almost like a sermon. "You brought that little girl into my world, and you knew what kind of man I was." Doreen didn't move. She didn't speak. Something had left her eyes. He stood over her for a long time, watching. Then he turned away, walked a few paces, and began digging into the mud with his boots, making space, clearing ground. She didn't watch. She couldn't. She thought of Robin's curls, the little giggle she made when she was tickled, the way she'd clung to that rabbit at the bus stop. She could still smell her. And then, in that moment, she felt nothing at all. When he came back, blade in hand, there was no fight left in her. No pleading, no screaming, just silence. A surrender, not of weakness, but of hopelessness. And when it was over, the forest grew quiet again, like it never happened. The bodies were never found. No search parties arrived, no news alerts. Doreen and Robin vanished into that swamp like stones dropped in black water. And Gaskins? He walked away, back through the trees, back to the world, back to the face he wore in public. The man who offered rides, who fixed cars, who cracked jokes at gas stations. He buried more than just 2 bodies that day. He buried trust. He buried innocence. And he buried the truth, deep in the Carolina woods, where no one would think to dig, at least not yet. Later, he would tell investigators that Doreen knew too much, that she was going to tell people things she shouldn't. But it was never about that. It was never about what she said. It was about power. It was about control. It was about a man who believed truly that he could play God in the woods of South Carolina, and no one would ever stop him. And for years, he was right. Doreen and Robin didn't just die that day. They disappeared. The trees didn't speak. The swamp didn't tell. The water closed over them like a secret, one that would stay hidden for years. No one knew what had happened to Doreen Hope Dempsey and her baby girl Robin. No missing persons bulletin made headlines. No search teams combed the woods. No police sirens. No questions. Because no one expected them to vanish. Gaskins driving away, cigarette in hand. Calm face, radio static. He got back in his car and drove home. Just like that. No panic. No cover-up. No fear. Because Gaskins didn't need to worry. There were no witnesses. No one knew Doreen had gotten into his car. And the only soul who could speak, Robin, now lay beneath still, black water. Back in town, Doreen's family thought maybe she changed her mind, took off again. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she didn't want to come home pregnant again, with another child from a man they disapproved of. They never imagined the truth, that she'd been just minutes away from safety, and never made it. Days turned to weeks, no sign of her. Some neighbors remembered seeing her. A few thought she'd left town. Others assumed she'd gone back to Florida. No one asked Gaskins. Why would they? He was just Pee-wee, the strange little man who worked on cars and told dirty jokes. Creepy, sure, but harmless. They didn't know what he'd done in those woods. Gaskins, he went on with his life like nothing had happened. He laughed with neighbors, went to work, even attended a funeral later that month, shaking hands, hugging people, smiling, all while knowing he had murdered a pregnant woman and a 2-year-old child, and left them to rot in the swamp behind his own backyard. He'd killed before. He would kill again. But this one was different. This wasn't a stranger on the highway or a hitchhiker in the dark. This was a woman who had trusted him, a child who had smiled at him. And he got away with it. For years, Doreen's name faded. Robin's memory faded. They became ghosts, a missing page in a long, brutal story. And the swamp? It kept their secret, until he told the truth himself. Now let's finish with the final chapter. Gaskins' confession and the legacy of the Dempsey case. Years passed. Donald Henry Gaskins kept killing. In alleys, in fields, even inside prison walls. His hands were always busy. His stories always changing. But eventually, the walls began to close in. In 1975, he was arrested and sentenced to life for multiple murders. But even behind bars, he couldn't stop. He murdered again, this time with a bomb smuggled inside a radio, killing a fellow inmate on death row. That's when the world finally realized this wasn't a man. This was a monster. Investigators began digging deeper. And for once, Gaskins wanted to talk. You want to hear it? All of it? Fine. But you better sit down. I done things you ain't never imagined. He bragged. He laughed. He detailed killings like they were bedtime stories, each more twisted than the last. But one story stopped the room cold. Doreen and Robin. She was expecting a baby with a black man, he said. She shouldn't have brought that mess back here. She brought her little girl, too. Pretty thing. Blonde curls. She smiled at me. He paused. I couldn't stop myself. That sentence alone was enough to haunt every detective in the room. He described the rope, the swamp, the screams, and the silence after. He told it without shame, without remorse. He said he killed them because it had to be done. Because they were a liability, because they didn't matter. But someone else did remember. Gaskins' daughter. Years later, in a documentary interview, she confirmed what he'd told her in private. He admitted it to me, she said. Said he couldn't help himself around that little girl. He knew it was wrong. He just didn't care. In 1991, Gaskins was executed by electric chair at Central Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. He had murdered at least 13 people, possibly more. But many believe Doreen and Robin were his most haunting victims, because they weren't just bodies on the highway. They were people, family. They trusted him, and he buried them in silence. To this day, no grave has been found, no bones, no final goodbye. Their story exists only in his words, and in the unbearable silence that swallowed them. Doreen never made it home. Robin never learned to say goodbye. But maybe now, maybe through stories like this, they're not forgotten. Maybe their names echo louder than his ever will. The Dempsey case became more than just another crime in Gaskins' list. It became a symbol of how evil can hide in everyday life, how people can use trust to harm others, and how innocent lives suffer when society ignores warning signs. After Gaskins was executed, things started to change in South Carolina. The case made people talk about how missing persons cases were handled, especially when it came to women and children. Doreen and Robin's story helped push for change. Detective Ray Henderson, who had spoken to Gaskins many times, could never forget how the killer's eyes lit up when he talked about Robin. In 1994, 3 years after the execution, Henderson started the Dempsey Foundation. It was a non-profit organization focused on helping find missing people in rural South Carolina. Doreen and Robin didn't have to die without anyone knowing, Henderson said during the Foundation's first press event. They didn't have to vanish without a trace. If we had better systems, if we had asked the right questions, if we had cared more, maybe they would still be alive. The foundation trained police to act faster in missing person cases. They created a team of volunteers who could help within hours. They also built a system to track patterns, hoping to spot the next Gaskins before he could hurt someone. But more than anything, they made sure people didn't forget. Every June, on the day Doreen and Robin went missing, the foundation holds a memorial at the Sumter County Courthouse. Families of missing people come, police attend, local leaders speak, and someone always reads their names aloud. Doreen Hope Dempsey, 22 years old, pregnant, just trying to come home. Robin Dempsey, 2 years old, blonde curls, holding her stuffed bunny. The memorial is both a tribute and a warning. It reminds people that dangerous people don't always look scary. Sometimes they seem like kind neighbors. Sometimes they offer help when you need it most. Gaskins was right about one thing. The swamp kept their secret, but he was wrong about something else. He thought they would be forgotten. But instead, they became unforgettable. Their stories spread beyond South Carolina. Podcasters, filmmakers, and writers shared it. Each version added more to their legacy, more voices speaking out from the darkness. And maybe, deep in those Carolina woods, where moss hangs like gray curtains and the water is still and dark, their spirits finally found peace. Not because of the justice system that failed them, not because of the people who ignored them, but because now they are remembered. Their names are spoken. Their story lights the way, warning others, helping others, saving others. Doreen and Robin Dempsey didn't just disappear into the swamp in 1973, they became legends, and legends don't die. Let's move on to the second serial killer story. Your neighbor bakes cookies and waves hello every morning, and his shop smells like fresh bread, and children love him and parents trust him completely. But every night after closing his bakery, he becomes someone else, someone terrifying, someone who hunts people like wild animals in the frozen wilderness. And this is not a movie, and this is not fiction, because this happened in a quiet neighborhood just like yours, where two ordinary men lived double lives so twisted that even experienced detectives had nightmares after learning the truth. And one collected nearly 1,000 photographs that police still cannot explain, while the other turned the vast Alaska wilderness into his personal hunting ground. And they fooled everyone for decades because they seemed so normal, so helpful, so trustworthy. But behind their friendly smiles lived monsters that would shock the world. And today, you will discover why the most dangerous people are often the ones you would never suspect. The story begins in a small bakery in Anchorage, Alaska. The smell of fresh bread filled the air every morning. Children pressed their faces against the window, watching the baker work. Their parents smiled and waved at the quiet man behind the counter. He seemed shy but kind, always ready with free cookies for the kids, always willing to help with community events. Regular customers knew his daily routine perfectly. He opened at 6 every morning, wearing the same flour-covered apron. He hummed quietly while kneading dough. His wife sometimes helped during busy hours, and their children played in the back room after school. The family seemed picture-perfect to everyone who met them. Local newspapers featured his bakery in community spotlights. Church groups ordered dozens of his pastries for events. School teachers brought their classes for field trips to watch him work. He donated leftover bread to homeless shelters every week. His reputation in the neighborhood was spotless. But after closing time, when the last customer left and the lights went dark, something changed in him. Something that had been building since childhood was about to explode in the most terrifying way possible. Nobody knew that this same man spent his nights planning something horrible. Nobody could imagine that their trusted neighbor was secretly one of the most dangerous killers in American history. Alaska in the 1970s was a wild place. Oil money brought rapid growth to Anchorage. New people arrived every day looking for work and opportunity. The city transformed from a small frontier town into a bustling metropolis almost overnight. Construction workers, oil rig operators, and fortune seekers flooded in from across America. But growth also brought darkness. Strip clubs opened on every corner. Crime rates soared. Drug dealers set up operations in back alleys. Young women, many far from home and family, found themselves struggling to survive in a harsh new world. Some turned to dangerous work just to pay for food and shelter. The police were overwhelmed. Missing person reports piled up on desks. Many cases went unsolved simply because there were not enough officers to handle them all. Women disappeared regularly, and authorities often assumed they had just moved on to other cities or fallen victim to the rough lifestyle many lived. This chaotic environment created perfect hunting conditions for predators. Among the thousands of new faces in town, one more stranger would never be noticed. One more friendly neighbor would blend in completely. These women became perfect targets for a man who had been waiting his whole life for revenge. His childhood had been filled with pain and humiliation. Born in 1939, he grew up with a face covered in terrible acne scars and a stutter that made speaking difficult. Other children mocked him. Girls ignored him. His father forced him to work long hours in the family bakery instead of playing outside like normal kids. The anger built slowly inside him, but he found one place where he felt powerful: the wilderness. With a hunting rifle in his hands, he was in complete control. Animals could not laugh at him or hurt his feelings. In the forest, he was the master. This gave him a terrible idea. In 1971, he moved to Alaska and opened his bakery. He got married, had children, and seemed to build a normal life. The community respected him. Local newspapers even wrote articles about his excellent hunting and archery skills. But the rage from his childhood had never disappeared. It had just been waiting. Late at night, when the bakery was closed and his family was asleep, he would drive through the dark streets of Anchorage. He studied the patterns of nightlife carefully. He knew which areas had the least police patrol. He understood which women seemed most vulnerable and desperate. His hunting grounds expanded beyond the city center. He explored remote parking lots near cheap motels. He watched bus stations where runaways arrived with nowhere to go. He memorized the schedules of late-night workers walking home alone. The predator spent months observing each potential victim before making his move. He learned their routines, their habits, their weaknesses. This patience made him incredibly dangerous, because by the time he approached them, he already knew exactly how to manipulate them. He looked for women who seemed lost or alone. Women who might not be missed if they disappeared. Women whose disappearances would not trigger major police investigations. His approach was always friendly. Sometimes he offered money. Sometimes he promised a safe ride home. Other times he used force. But he always got them into his car. What happened next separated him from ordinary criminals. He did not just attack and leave. He had something much worse planned. This man owned a small airplane. After assaulting his victims at his house, he would blindfold them and force them into the plane. Then he would fly deep into the Alaskan wilderness, hundreds of miles from any help or hope of rescue. The flight itself was part of his twisted psychological game. He wanted his victims to feel completely helpless and isolated. He would describe the vast emptiness below them as they flew. He told them about the wild animals waiting in the forest. He explained how their screams would never be heard by another human being. His plane was specially modified for his dark purposes. He had removed seats to create more cargo space. He installed extra fuel tanks for longer flights. He kept survival equipment that he would never share with his victims. He had built a remote cabin in the middle of nowhere. No roads led to it. No neighbors could hear screams. The nearest town was over 200 miles away. It was the perfect place for his twisted game. The cabin contained disturbing evidence of his crimes. Clothes from previous victims hung on hooks. Personal belongings were displayed like trophies. Maps marked his favorite hunting spots in the surrounding wilderness. After landing his plane, he explained the rules. His victims could run. He would give them a head start, just like hunters do with animals. Then he would chase them through the forest with his rifle and knife. Some women tried to hide in trees. Others attempted to swim across freezing rivers. A few tried to fight back. But he knew these woods better than anyone. His hunting skills were expert level. None of them ever escaped. To him, this was not murder. This was sport. This was justice for all the years of humiliation and rejection. The vast Alaska wilderness became his private hunting ground, where he could be the predator instead of the victim. The bodies were left for wild animals or buried in unmarked graves. Some were never found at all. Alaska is a perfect place to hide evidence. The wilderness can swallow secrets forever. For 12 long years, women vanished from Anchorage with disturbing regularity. Most were young, struggling with difficult lives, far from families who might search for them. Police assumed they had moved to other cities or fallen victim to the dangerous lifestyle many lived. Nobody suspected the friendly neighborhood baker. His double life seemed perfect. During the day, he smiled at customers and made birthday cakes for their children. At night, he planned his next hunt. He won community awards for his archery skills. He attended school events with his own kids. He was the model citizen that everyone trusted. But every perfect crime eventually has a flaw. June 13th, 1983 started like any other night for the baker. He had found his next victim and brought her to his house. He prepared his plane for another hunting trip into the wilderness. But as he loaded his equipment, something went wrong. The 17-year-old girl broke free from her restraints. While he was distracted with the airplane, she ran. Still handcuffed, barefoot, and terrified, she sprinted through the darkness toward the airport road. At 4 a.m, a truck driver saw her waving frantically for help. He stopped and found a crying, desperate teenager who told an unbelievable story. She described being kidnapped by a short man with glasses who stuttered when he spoke. His house had a basement with hunting trophies on the walls. He was going to fly her somewhere remote to hunt her like an animal. The truck driver took her straight to the police. Her detailed description led them to check flight records. One name appeared that matched her story perfectly. But when police questioned him, he denied everything. He had an alibi from a friend who claimed they were together during the alleged kidnapping. The police faced a choice: believe a respected businessman and father, or trust the word of a troubled teenager. They chose to believe him. The girl's story should have ended there. The baker should have been free to continue his terrible hobby. But one detective could not shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. This detective began investigating quietly. He discovered something that made his blood run cold. For years, human remains had been found scattered across the Alaskan wilderness. All were women. All matched the description of those disappearing from Anchorage. All showed signs of being hunted and killed like animals. The detective convinced his supervisors to get a search warrant. In late 1983, police thoroughly searched the Baker's home. What they found shocked even experienced investigators. Hidden behind a ceiling panel were dozens of pieces of women's jewelry that did not belong to his wife. In the attic, they discovered multiple weapons, but the most chilling evidence was found tucked behind a headboard. An aviation map with 24 X marks scattered across the wilderness. Each X, investigators realized, marked the location of a grave. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the threat of execution, the Baker finally confessed. He admitted to killing 17 women over 12 years. He calmly described his system of flying victims into the wilderness and hunting them for sport. He showed no emotion as he explained how he selected women who would not be missed. He never apologized to the families of his victims. He spoke about hunting human beings the same way others might discuss hunting deer. The courtroom was silent as families listened to his confession. He was sentenced to 461 years in prison, plus life without parole. He died behind bars in 2014, taking many secrets to his grave. But this story of hidden evil was just beginning. 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, another monster was perfecting the art of living an invisible life. This man seemed even more normal than the Alaska Baker. He lived on a regular street in South Central LA, where families had known each other for generations. Block parties happened in his front yard. Children played on his porch steps. His house looked exactly like every other house on the street. Small front lawn, chain-link fence, carport with an old car. Nothing stood out as unusual or threatening. Neighbors borrowed tools from him. Mothers asked him to watch their children while they ran errands. The community trusted him completely. During summer barbecues, he grilled hamburgers for everyone. At Christmas, he helped string lights on houses. When elderly neighbors needed help with repairs, he volunteered his time and skills. He worked as a mechanic, fixing cars in his front yard. Neighbors loved his jokes and stories. Parents trusted him around their children. Local kids would gather around to watch him work on engines, fascinated by his mechanical knowledge. His reputation was built over many years of careful relationship building. He attended community meetings. He participated in neighborhood watch programs. He even helped organize fundraising events for local schools and churches. For over 20 years, he was also one of the most prolific serial killers in California history. Born in 1952, this man had seemed like a regular kid. Teachers remembered him as quiet and polite. He was good with his hands and often helped neighbors repair bicycles and electronics. After high school, he joined the army but was discharged after a serious incident in Germany that most people back home never learned about. Returning to Los Angeles, he got a job collecting garbage. He drove through neighborhoods every day, learning the streets and studying the people. Later, he became a mechanic, working from his home and building a reputation as reliable and helpful. He married, had children, and appeared to live a completely ordinary life. But like the Alaska Baker, he was hiding something terrible. The first confirmed murder happened in 1985. A 29-year-old woman was found shot 3 times and dumped behind a garbage container. Over the next 3 years, more bodies appeared with frightening frequency. All were African American women. All showed signs of sexual assault. All had been shot in the same execution style. Despite the clear pattern, police did not initially connect these murders. The victims were often struggling with addiction or involved in dangerous lifestyles. Authorities treated their deaths as separate incidents of street violence. The media paid little attention, but in the community, fear began to grow. Women whispered warnings about a man driving a rusty van, offering rides to vulnerable women. Some survivors escaped and told stories of being attacked, but no official warnings were issued. By 1988, the murders seemed to stop. Police investigations went cold. The public moved on to other concerns, but the killer had not stopped. He had simply gotten smarter. This man studied police procedures carefully. He watched the news to see if anyone was connecting his crimes. He changed his methods regularly and cleaned up evidence thoroughly. When things became too dangerous, he would simply wait, sometimes for years. In 2002, another woman was found murdered in the same style. More bodies appeared in 2003, 2005, and 2007. The killer had been active all along, just more carefully hidden. Finally, investigators began using advanced DNA technology to solve cold cases. In 2008, they got a breakthrough. DNA from multiple crime scenes partially matched a man in the state database. This led them to his father. To confirm their suspicions without alerting him, undercover police followed the suspect to a pizza restaurant. After he left, they collected his leftover food and utensils from the trash. The DNA analysis proved their theory correct. On July 7th, 2010, police raided his South LA home. What they discovered was beyond their worst nightmares. In his garage and bedroom were nearly 1,000 photographs and videos. Most showed women in various states of undress. Many appeared unconscious. Some were clearly dead. Dozens of these women were never identified. The horrible truth became clear. The known victims represented only a fraction of his actual crimes. The man was charged with 10 murders, but investigators believe the real number could be 50 or more. During his trial, he showed no emotion as prosecutors described his calculated targeting of society's most vulnerable women. In 2016, he was convicted and sentenced to death.
You shall suffer the death penalty.
He died in prison in 2020, taking his secrets with him. Many questions were never answered about the women in his photographs and the true scope of his crimes. Both men succeeded for decades because they understood a crucial truth. These predators worked hard to appear normal and trustworthy. They studied their communities, learned who would be missed and who would not, and carefully selected victims that society often ignored or forgot. Their success came from patience, planning, and the terrible knowledge that most people judge others by appearances. If you want to learn more about crime awareness and how to identify dangerous behaviors in our communities, please share this story and subscribe to our channel. Everyone deserves to stay informed and safe. Let's move on to the third serial killer story. Today we explore the dark thoughts of two evil people who looked normal. So get your snacks ready, sit back, and let's enter a terrifying true story. It was past midnight in Seoul when a man walked into the rain, jacket pulled up tight, in an area filled with fancy apartment buildings that sparkled like diamonds. He walked toward a house that looked perfect and expensive. Inside, everything was peaceful and warm. An older couple, rich and successful, had no idea what was coming as they prepared to sleep. They did not hear when their front door opened. Minutes later, their peaceful life ended in violence and death. And that is how South Korea's deadliest serial killer started a killing spree that would terrify the whole country for months. His name was Yu Young-chul, and the terrible things he did over the next 10 months were so awful that even experienced police officers could not sleep well after learning what happened. Yu was not always a killer. He was born as an unwanted child on April 18, 1970, in Gochang County, South Korea. His family had almost no money. His father abandoned them early. His mother clearly did not want to raise him, and his grandmother took care of him. They stayed in a broken old house where cold air came through cracks in the walls and meals were usually just plain rice. Yu was quiet and acted differently than other children. Kids at school made fun of him, and his teachers said he was lazy. He rarely talked to anyone, but he noticed everything. He noticed how children from wealthy families received praise. He noticed how people with money never had to struggle. And he noticed how his own family was ignored. These feelings stayed inside him forever. He began stealing when he was very young. First food, then clothing, then cash. By 18, he already had a criminal history. Theft, breaking into homes and creating fake documents. He spent most of his 20s going between youth jail and adult prison. But being locked up did not make him afraid. Instead, it showed him how to lie better, how to trick people, and how to hide his anger. In 1993, he got married. His wife worked giving massages, and for some time he attempted to have a regular life. They had a baby boy, but this family life fell apart quickly. In 2000, Yu was found guilty of attacking a teenage girl. He returned to prison for several years. When they finally released him, his wife had divorced him. His son refused to talk to him, and his normal life was completely destroyed. While in prison, he learned about another killer named Jong Do-yong, who killed wealthy families in their homes. This fascinated him deeply. The way Jong secretly entered rich people's houses and murdered them. He thought, I could do that too. I could be even better. So when he left prison in September 2003, he did not try to fix his life. Instead, he started hunting for victims. The first murders were violent and well-planned. September 24th, 2003, a rich married couple living in an expensive neighborhood. Yu broke into their home carrying a hammer and beat them both to death. He made it appear like a robbery, but he barely took anything. The crime looked confusing to police, but not scary enough to create public fear. 2 weeks passed and it happened again. 3 victims, another expensive house, no broken locks. Victims beaten with their heads crushed, nothing important stolen. During the next 6 weeks, he murdered 6 more people using the exact same method. Rich people, older couples, beaten to death, usually while they slept in their own beds. Police investigators had no clues. The crimes did not match normal robbery patterns, but they also did not seem like serial killer behavior. And Yu was extremely careful with every detail. He always wore gloves. He changed into different clothes after each crime. He escaped through back doors or climbed out windows. And he watched television news every night to check if police suspected him. They did not. But then something changed. In December, Yu began dating a new girlfriend. She was young, attractive, and worked at a massage business. For a short moment, Yu thought maybe he could start over. But when she learned about his criminal background and that he had no money, she ended their relationship immediately. That rejection hurt him deeply, and it changed something inside his mind. Yu decided to stop killing rich people. Now he planned to murder women instead, specifically sex workers. He claimed it was to clean up society and punish them for being immoral. But that was false. The truth was simple. He hated these women because one of them had rejected him. He rented a very small apartment in Western Seoul and transformed it into a killing place. He would telephone massage companies, request a private appointment, and wait for the woman to arrive. When she entered through the doorway, Yu acted completely charming, always smiling and being polite. He would give her something to drink and make friendly conversation. Then when she turned her back, he would suddenly hit her hard in the head using a hammer. He murdered them very quickly. Then he cut their bodies into pieces in his bathroom using sharp saws and knives. He kept the water running to hide any sounds. He wrapped the body parts into plastic bags. Sometimes he cooked the human flesh to prevent bad smells. Other times he threw the remains in distant mountain areas or empty construction locations. Between March and July 2004, Yu killed at least 11 women using this horrible method, possibly even more. The killings became more frequent. In July, he killed 2 different women in less than 7 days. He seemed unstoppable, but he was also starting to make careless mistakes. Multiple massage businesses began noticing that their employees were vanishing after going to appointments in the same location. A few women who survived even described a strange man who made them feel uncomfortable. He was too silent, too cold. On July 15, 2004, one business owner created a trap. He sent 2 employees to Yu's apartment with a secret plan to contact police if anything dangerous happened. The moment one woman walked into the building and felt something was wrong, she escaped. Police officers arrived minutes later and discovered Yu standing calmly in the hallway, looking surprised but not panicked. At the police station, he refused to speak for many hours. Then suddenly, he asked for a cigarette. When the officer gave him one, Yu said something shocking. "I have killed 20 people." Officers thought he was lying until he explained exactly where all the bodies were hidden. He took investigators to mountains, to rivers, to public parks where human bones were buried inside garbage bags and shallow graves. He explained every single murder with complete details. Names, specific dates, and what tools he used. At his trial in court, Yu smiled inappropriately. When victims' family members cried and screamed, he just stared with blank, empty eyes. One time, when an angry man tried to attack him in the courtroom, Yu actually laughed out loud. He confessed to everything without holding back. He stated he had no guilt or regrets. When the judge asked him why he committed these murders, he simply answered, "Because I hated those people." He received a death sentence in June 2005. But in South Korea, the government has not executed anyone since 1997. So Yu remains locked in solitary confinement today, with his execution delayed forever. He spends every day alone in a tiny prison cell being monitored constantly. His terrible story became huge in the media. News programs repeated his confession videos constantly. Documentary films analyzed his criminal mind. A famous movie called The Chaser was loosely inspired by his crimes. Even years afterward, his name still creates fear in the nation's memory. But the most frightening part is that he never appeared to be a dangerous monster. Not until it was too late. There exist photographs of Yu from the early 2000s, dressed in a normal jacket, looking like any regular man you might see on public transportation. Nobody suspected the quiet neighbor was inviting innocent people to their deaths, with nothing except a friendly smile and convincing lies. He did not follow his victims through dark streets. He welcomed them inside politely, and they never walked back out alive. In total, he admitted to murdering 26 people. Police could only confirm 20 deaths, but some investigators believe the actual number is much higher. Today, Yu Young-chul stays as one of the most frightening criminals in South Korea's entire history. Not just because of what he did, but because of how easily he did it, how calmly he confessed everything, and how carefully he planned his violence. It is not the blood or the total number of victims that haunts people's minds most. It is the terrifying thought that someone exactly like him could be standing right behind you while waiting in line, appearing friendly and silent, making plans to kill, and you would never realize anything until it is far too late to escape. While Yu Young-chul terrified South Korea in the early 2000s, French-born serial killer Patrick Shaw had already horrified authorities 10 years earlier with his disgusting House of Horrors murders. It was the type of building most people would walk past without noticing. Collapsed roof, shattered windows, wild plants growing up the walls. Inside, the air felt thick with mold, dust, and something unexplainable that seemed to stick to your skin. And hidden underneath all that decay was a scene so disgusting that even experienced officers felt sick. On one wall, written in crude black paint, "Death Room." Below those words lay what used to be a living woman, now brutally murdered and destroyed. Her body was positioned like twisted artwork. Investigators didn't realize it yet, but they had just discovered the sick mind of Patrick Shaw, a man with no home, no verifiable past, and no trace of human conscience. Patrick Joseph Max Shaw was born into complete silence in 1966, abandoned at a French orphanage days after birth with no explanation. From the beginning, something about him was different. He didn't play with other kids. He simply watched. While other children created friendships, he created habits. Lying, stealing, manipulating. He would cry when he wanted something, laugh when others felt pain, and show no expression when punished. By 16, he was gone from the system. He bounced between odd jobs, homeless shelters, and train stations. Patrick was like a ghost. In the early 1990s, he drifted into Italy, surviving on charity and manipulation. He possessed a weathered charm, with eyes that seemed to look straight through a person. People gave him food, offered rides, gave their trust. They always regretted it. By 1995, he was homeless along the Ligurian coast. That's where he met Ingrid Neuber, a German woman also struggling. She was soft-spoken, shy, completely worn down. They traveled together, sleeping in alleyways and abandoned houses. Patrick made her feel protected. That was his gift. They found an old crumbling house in Cuneo, tucked away off a dirt road. Dark, damaged, smelling of mold. But to them, it represented shelter. They stayed there for several days until one night when everything changed. He waited until she fell asleep. Then very quietly, he picked up a rusty wrench and brought it crashing down on her skull. She moved once, then stopped. He hit her again and again until her face was unrecognizable. He dragged her body across the room, removed her clothing, and began mutilating her corpse with terrifying calmness. He cut off her breasts and placed them over her eyes. He sliced deep into her torso, opening her body like a butcher cutting meat. Using black paint, he wrote "Death Room" on the wall above her. Then he simply walked away. Weeks later, a hiker smelled something terrible and pushed through the broken door. Police were stunned. No suspect, no motive, no fingerprint. Patrick had already moved north, blending in with other homeless populations. That's where he encountered Nadia Boccarino, 42, recently displaced and vulnerable. He played the same game. Fake sympathy, manufactured charm, promises of protection. She followed him trustingly. And just like before, it ended in horrific violence. He took Nadia to an open sandpit near an industrial site. He struck her in the head, dragged her into the dirt, and broke her spine in two. He tore into her abdomen, left her body exposed, then buried her in shallow sand, almost as if he wanted someone to discover her. And someone did. A cyclist noticed the wind had shifted the sand. A single breast was sticking out, sunburned, misshapen, grotesque. Police found the rest of her body, badly rotting, dismembered, face unrecognizable. Witnesses reported seeing Nadia with a strange man, tall, thin, with sharp cheekbones and dead eyes. Within days, they identified Patrick. He was arrested and charged with Ingrid's murder. At his trial, he sat perfectly still, barely blinking. When the prosecutor read the horrific details, he appeared completely bored. He received 26 years for Ingrid's murder, plus 2 years for hiding Nadia's corpse. In Porto Azzurro prison, guards kept him isolated. He rarely spoke. He drew strange diagrams constantly, distorted faces, twisted limbs. Eventually, officials gave him a cellmate, Alberto Colasma, a criminal who talked too much. It was a fatal mismatch. One morning in 2005, guards opened the cell door and froze. Blood splattered everywhere. Patrick sat cross-legged on the floor, hands covered in blood, smiling faintly. On the walls, painted in fresh blood, were crosses, mysterious numbers and symbols nobody could decipher. Patrick never explained. Later, he simply said Alberto talked too much. Another trial, another sentence, another psychiatric facility. Then, in 2007, he wrote a letter to the prosecutor confessing to all 3 murders: Ingrid, Nadia, and Alberto. He said he felt no regret, that each person was destined to die, that he had freed them from suffering. He called himself a tool sent to fix society's problems. Despite this confession, he couldn't be recharged for Nadia's murder. His existing sentence already covered that crime. Justice has its limits, and Patrick understood them perfectly. For the next 15 years, he disappeared from public view in a psychiatric institute. Isolated, silent, watching people with those same glassy, emotionless eyes. The disturbing drawings never stopped. Page after page of distorted human forms, bodies with missing limbs, gaping mouths, women without eyes. Then, on the night of March 25th, 2022, it all ended. At 3:17 a.m., night shift staff checked on him. He hadn't moved. They called his name, no response. When they touched his arm, it felt cold. Patrick Joseph Max Shaw died just as quietly as he had lived. He was 56 years old. He was buried in a municipal grave paid for by the city. No funeral, no priest, no gravestone, just an identification number and a hole in the ground. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to support us even more, consider becoming a channel member. It means a lot. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Let's move on to the 4th serial killer story. Everything began with drops of blood. On the morning of November 17th, 1957, a deputy sheriff opened the back door of a farmhouse far from town in Plainfield, Wisconsin. The woman who owned the hardware store, Bernice Worden, had gone missing. Her last sale was written on a receipt with just one name: Ed Gein. The deputy walked in. The air was ice cold, but the stink that reached him made him sick to his stomach like rotten flesh, and something much worse. A wet, musty sweetness, like death mixed with grease. His flashlight beam moved through the darkness. Trash was piled up high, mountains of dirt reaching human height. Every spot was covered in filth and powder. Then came the shed. Hanging from the ceiling beams by her feet was a dead body, without clothes, without a head. cut open from the bottom to the top like farm animals. The body had been washed, emptied, opened with exact cutting. The body belonged to Bernice Worden, but nobody could tell who she was anymore. What the police discovered inside that place would do more than just surprise the nation. It would leave a mark on America's mind that would never heal. This was more than just killing. It was more than just craziness. It was a death project built over many years. Because inside that farmhouse lived a man who had stopped being fully human. Something had ended inside Ed long before he took anyone's life. And something else, something more cold, more ancient, and more hollow had filled that space. Ed came into the world in 1906, but his tale starts long before he was born. It begins with his mother. Augusta was a religious extremist who thought the world was full of wrongdoing. She hated sex, especially female bodies, and believed she was God's special tool. Her husband George was a mean, angry drunk who couldn't succeed at anything. He hurt his family, most of all the kids. Ed and his older brother Henry got beaten, screamed at, and kept away from other people. But it was Augusta who caused the worst harm. She hammered one idea into Ed from when he could first walk. All females except her were sick, dirty, wicked. Sexual desire was wrong. Female bodies were rotten. The woman's shape was a trick made by the devil. In 1915, the family moved to a farmhouse sitting on 195 acres of ground just outside Plainfield, Wisconsin. No people nearby, no companions, no radio, no television, just angry religious speeches and the noise of wind moving through the branches. Augusta kept the boys away from everything. Ed was her chosen one, and she let him know it. She would wash him even when he became a teenager, checking his body for dirty things, and hurt him if he had wet dreams or liked girls. If you find that wrong, you're correct. But that's not even where it starts. When Ed reached 38, his father passed away. Then, some years after, his brother Henry died during a strange brush fire. Ed took police right to Henry's dead body, even though he said he couldn't locate him before. The body had marks of injury, bruises, perhaps even hits, but the fire got the blame. Nobody got charged, and then Augusta had a stroke. Ed took care of her desperately until she passed in 1945. After that, he locked her bedroom like a grave, kept everything just as it was. Her clothing still hung in the wardrobe. Her Bible still rested on the small table, open to the book of Revelation. The other parts of the house, he let fall apart. What came next was something the human mind shouldn't have to understand. Ed became totally unmade, alone. He started reading books about body science, head shrinking, Nazi doctor tests. He looked at old medical books and adult pictures with surgery images. He spent hours in the dim light of his decaying farmhouse, studying these materials with frightening focus. The pages became worn from his constant reading. He took notes in the margins, sketching crude diagrams of human anatomy. His fascination grew darker with each passing night. But what started in books soon went to the actual world. At nighttime, he would grab a digging tool and go to the nearby graveyard. He read the death notices in the local paper religiously, circling certain names with a pencil. He memorized the dates of funerals, the locations of fresh graves, the descriptions of the deceased. He became an expert at reading the patterns of the cemetery. He waited for women to be newly buried, middle-aged, big women, women who reminded him of Augusta. He would watch from a distance during the burial services, hiding behind trees, learning the layout of the plots. Then he'd dig them out, sometimes by himself, sometimes in a trance, sometimes fully knowing what he did. The work was hard, physical, taking hours in the cold Wisconsin nights. He developed a system, a terrible routine that became almost mechanical in its efficiency. And he didn't just dig up dead bodies. He took pieces. He removed skin. He treated the skin like animal hide, using techniques he'd learned from hunting books and taxidermy manuals. The process was detailed and required patience. He would carefully separate the skin from the underlying tissue, then preserve it using salt and other chemicals he'd acquired. He cut off nipples, lips, ears. He took out private parts and kept them in glass containers, labeling some of them with dates and initials only he understood. He made masks from female faces and put them on around the house, sometimes talking to himself in the mirror while wearing them. He kept a box of vaginas, one covered in silver paint and hung like a hunting prize on his wall. Each item had its place, its purpose in his twisted world. He made furniture, a chair covered with buttocks, carefully stretched and tanned to create a cushion. A light shade made of peeled facial skin that cast eerie shadows when the lamp was lit. A belt made only of human nipples, sewn together with disturbing precision. The craftsmanship was horrifying in its attention to detail. Each piece took time, effort, and a steady hand. There were eating bowls created from skulls, polished until they gleamed in the lamplight. There were tight clothing made of body skin, stitched together to form wearable garments. There was a human heart discovered in a plastic bag in the kitchen, preserved as if it were just another piece of meat. And in the room corner, a vest made of breasts and belly flesh, a woman's outfit complete with straps and fastenings. The vest was his masterpiece, the culmination of years of terrible work. He said that sometimes he would put it on at night, covering himself with his mother's old dress over the skin outfit, putting a saved mask over his face, and moving through the house with lantern light, acting like he was her, acting like she never left. He explained he wanted to turn into her. He wasn't just copying his mother. He was attempting to bring her back to life, to merge with her spirit, to become the person who had controlled every moment of his existence. In his broken mind, this made perfect sense. If he couldn't have her back, he would become her. If he couldn't hear her voice, he would speak with her words. The transformation was both physical and psychological, a complete surrender to his obsession. In December 1954, Mary Hogan, a 54-year-old bar owner in Pine Grove, Wisconsin, vanished without any sign. She had been working alone that evening, serving drinks to the regular customers who frequented her establishment. The tavern was quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. But that night, something changed. When patrons arrived the next morning, they found the place empty, the door unlocked, blood on the floor. The only hint left was an empty bullet shell discovered near her place, lying on the wooden floorboards like a small piece of evidence that told a much larger story. Even with serious searching, police interviews, and local volunteers combing the nearby woods, no more clues appeared, and her case went unsolved. Months turned into years, and Mary Hogan became another missing person, another cold case file gathering dust on a shelf. It wasn't until November 1957, when police searched Ed Gein's land because of the missing Bernice Worden, that the terrible truth about Hogan's end was found. Inside Gein's farmhouse, police found a brown paper bag holding Hogan's face, carefully removed and saved. Close by, her skull sat in a box. Gein later confessed to shooting Hogan in the head and moving her body back to his shed. He said he couldn't remember the details of her death, claiming the memories were foggy, like watching someone else commit the act. But his confession matched the real evidence discovered at his home, down to the smallest details. The investigators knew he was telling the truth, even if his mind had tried to hide it from itself. Then, on November 16, 1957, Ed Gein entered Bernice Worden's hardware store. It was a cold Saturday morning. The store was empty except for Bernice, who was working alone while her son was out hunting. Ed knew this. He had planned it. He had been to the store before, watching, waiting, choosing his moment with careful calculation. He bought car fluid and casually questioned Bernice about the cost of a gun on the wall, a .22 caliber rifle that hung among the other merchandise. His voice was calm, friendly even, showing no sign of what was about to happen. When she turned to look at the cash register, reaching for the receipt book to write up the sale, he shot her in the back of the head, fast, quiet, and unexpected. The sound echoed through the empty store. She never saw it happen. She fell without making another sound. Without waiting, he put her dead body into the back of her own truck, took it to his lonely farmhouse, and started the horrible work that would later shock investigators. In the shed, he cut her up like livestock, removing organs, removing the head, draining blood, and cutting her body in two pieces. Hung upside down by her legs with a bar at her ankles, and ropes holding her wrists. Her body was prepared like a deer, showing the planned and ceremony-like nature of Ed's body cutting. This scary display showed the frightening size of his obsession and careful planning. The final hint that brought police to Gein was strangely simple. Bernice's last sale on paper, a receipt showing only one name, Ed Gein. That single record became the string that pulled apart his secret world of terror. When police finally came to arrest him, Gein didn't fight back. He simply stated, "I guess you want to know about Mary Hogan, too." They couldn't believe what they were hearing. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. This was 1957, before serial killers, before true crime, before scary movies got truly dark. Nobody had ever witnessed anything like this, and everything he did was actual. Photos from the scene were so disturbing that officers had to exit the room. Some cried, some got sick. Ed was charged with one killing, Bernice Worden's, but was called legally crazy and sent to a state mental hospital. Years later, when he was thought able to stand trial, he went to court and was found guilty, but still mentally sick. He would never be free again. In the hospital, Ed became a perfect patient. Nice, silent. He read the Bible. He played board games. He said he liked it there because nobody criticized him. He died in 1984 from cancer. He was buried in a grave with no marker next to his mother, the woman who created him. But even in death, Ed couldn't escape the attention of the world. His grave was meant to be a quiet, nameless hole in the ground, just another forgotten dead body in the Plainfield Cemetery. But true evil never stays hidden. Over the years, dark curiosity made his resting place into a macabre tourist spot. People traveled from everywhere, some out of interest, others to damage it. His grave marker was broken away piece by souvenir hunters until it vanished completely. Now, he lies in a spot of grass with no name, just shadows, just quiet. But what he did, what he built in that house, never went silent. Science experts said his crimes didn't just break the law, they broke nature. The way he saved human skin, the way he treated and sewed it, showed a disturbing level of attention. A man who could hardly read, who had no real training in anything medical or mechanical, was somehow able to change dead bodies into objects, clothing, furniture, ceremonies. They said it wasn't madness. Not completely. It was dedication. He treated the dead like building materials, like tools for something sacred in his mind, a holy act to his mother. It wasn't just loving the dead, it was bringing back to life. Inside those walls, time had frozen. There was no electric power, no indoor water. Rats moved over stacks of old newspapers from the 1940s. Plates covered in dust sat where they'd been placed years before. But at the center of everything was her room, his mother's. Perfect, untouched, saved like a museum display. The bed made, the window covers closed, not a single bit of dirt on the floor. He hadn't just closed it off, he had made it holy. His church, his temple, everything else rotting, fallen apart, full of bones. Even after many years in an institution, Ed never once showed sorry feelings. He never cried for the victims, never asked to be forgiven. What little feeling he showed was kept for Augusta. He missed her. He talked about her like she was still living. Sometimes when the nurses at the hospital walked past his room, they'd hear him talking to someone quietly, gently, like a child being told a bedtime story. But he was always by himself. What's most disturbing about Ed Gein isn't just the killing. It's that he didn't kill many. By all official records, only 2 victims, Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden. But the number of graves he robbed, dozens, maybe more. And the line between the dead and the living, for Ed it was very thin. He crossed it every night. He didn't kill for sexual desire or anger or money. He killed because death to him was changeable. Something you could shape, something you could put on. He built a second skin, a second self. Not to frighten, not to hunt, but to become mother. That's what makes his story different from all the others. Other killers destroy. Ed tried to rebuild piece by piece, flesh by flesh. He thought if he arranged the parts just right, if he wore the right mask, sewed the right vest, walked the halls in just the right way, he could bring her back. But the dead don't return. They stay. And that house in Plainfield, it stayed for years after his arrest. Empty, closed up, a tomb of secrets. In 1958, just a few months after his trial, the farmhouse strangely burned to the ground. Local people said it was deliberate fire. Nobody ever admitted to it. No arrests were made, just flames in the night, eating decades of horror in silence. Ashes were all that was left. It was fitting. A place built on rot reduced to dust and smoke like something hell itself didn't want to hold. But the legacy that lived on. The monsters Ed inspired walk straight into our movie theaters, our books, our nightmares. Norman Bates in Psycho. The quiet man obsessed with his mother, keeping her dead body in the house. Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The brutal one who wore skin-like clothing. Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. The killer who sewed his change out of women's flesh. They're made up. He was real. And somehow, reality was worse. You see, the scariest thing about Ed Gein isn't what he did. It's that nobody saw it coming. To the townspeople, he was just Ed, a repairman. Strange, sure, but polite, helpful, quiet. Nobody imagined the things he was doing when the sun went down. Nobody suspected the skin hanging in his closet wasn't animal leather. He lived alone in a haunted house made of flesh for 12 years, and nobody knew. That's what keeps people up at night. Not the blood, not the body parts, not even the mask. It's the idea that the smiling man next door, the one cutting his lawn or fixing your sink, might be sewing together his mother in the dark. That's the real horror of Ed Gein. He didn't just create monsters. He reminded us they're not always easy to see. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel more personally, consider becoming a channel member. It truly means a lot and helps keep these stories coming. See you in the next one.